Before we start, I'm going to mention obviously any of the cloud companies that we have listed here. We don't specifically endorse those companies, but obviously, in context, we do need to talk about them. So, just quickly about me, I am the Senior Manager of New Product Development at Hawaiian Telcom, in charge of business markets. This is actually my fourth Hawaiian Telcom University presentation, but only 3 actual presentations, considering that unfortunately one time I caught a nasty case of the flu. But I'm here today. So I'm going to go through the agenda real quick. We're going to talk about why enterprise cloud, and we're going to actually take a step back and look at it from a business perspective as to why all of you are being asked, if you will, to pursue cloud services. Then we're going to talk about how enterprise cloud actually delivers on your mission and your goal as an IT, if you will, person. And then we're going to talk about what first, how do we implement the cloud, and what are the targets to look at first for implementation. And then I'm going to turn it over to Roger, and he's going to talk about what Star Advertiser did when they were faced with some very similar situations in terms of cost and cloud implementation. So I'm going to start with why enterprise cloud, right? So same mission, new expectations. So to begin with, I don't know about you, but for me personally, working at Hawaiian Telcom and being in charge of new product development, a lot of people look at me as the product that I actually have helped deliver, right? So at Hawaiian Telcom, I'm the VoIP guy, right? At a lot of companies, IT is looked at as the product that they're actually delivering. So for example, you can be the Exchange guy, or you can be the SharePoint guy, or you can be the CRM guy, right? Or the network guy. And those are some of the challenges, and unfortunately, the number one mistake is that business owners actually assume that the IT products, right, are what define IT's purpose. But if we're going to be successful at something, right, then we need to know, obviously, why we're doing it, right? So instead of looking at the cloud and saying, well, I need to do the cloud, ask yourself, why? What purpose does it serve? So, to start with, what is our purpose in IT? Well, number one, it's a pledge. It's a pledge that we make to the business to serve the technology needs of the business and its customers. And that can be both internal customers, right, like employees, as well as external customers, your actual customers, the people who pay the bills, right? They look at it as a consumable. They look at it as a service that they're getting from you, right? It's very similar to what we do. We're a service provider, and yet all of you are service providers just like we are. Unfortunately, the expectations for service providers like yourselves have changed. Remember this diagram that we used to say, we used to go in and we were looking for funding for a project, and we'd say, well, you can have it good, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, but you can only pick 2 of those. You can't pick 3, right? Unfortunately, the expectation is now all 3, right? The expectations, if you will, for yourselves have changed. And this is what I call the new mission impossible, right? What they're asking you to do is previously considered impossible. What's driving this? Why do they have these new expectations on us to deliver good, cheap, and fast? Well, IT has, as we all know, matured, right? There is an increasing focus on strategy and how the role that IT plays in that, as opposed to the technology that we deploy, right? So what they ask us to do is to find more cost-effective ways, right, of keeping the lights on while simultaneously investing in growth. Take $2 in cost from day to day and move $1 of that over so that we can continue to expand and grow. The other thing that's changed is end user experience now trumps systems. Once upon a time, you had an IT platform, you had an IT service, you delivered to the customer, you told them how it was used. Now they come to you and say, this is how I need to consume it. And you have to deliver, right? And then finally, rapid response to market change. Once upon a time, a 12-month to 14-month development cycle for delivering a service to your customers was acceptable. Now, they expect us to turn things around in 3, 4 months, 5 months, right? This is the kind of business agility that's demanded and speed to market that drive the financial rewards, right? The sooner that I can get it done, the sooner I can either reap the cost savings or the sooner that I can actually expect the increased revenues from growth. So, in the industry, there's been a big transition to what they call agile, right? Which is rapid, if you will, incremental business value as opposed to waterfall, which is 12 to 14 months of planning and execution in order to deliver a comprehensive solution, which may or may not meet the market needs at that time. So these are the things that are driving the new expectation of good, cheap, and fast, all at the same time. So how do you deliver on Mission Impossible? How do you actually come up with a strategy and a plan, right, to deliver these things? Well, that's where the cloud comes in. The reason that so many business owners are pushing, if you will, for the cloud and pushing enterprise IT to adopt the cloud is because it helps them achieve those particular goals, right? So things like utility pricing and elastic scalability, right? These reduce CapEx. They allow you pay as you go and pay as you grow. Nobody wants to make a bet anymore on $2 or $3 million worth of investment if they don't know that the revenues are going to be there. They would rather, if you will, pay to get into that market, grow it exponentially, and then make the investment when the revenues are proven, right? Scalability. If things do go well, we want to be able to rapidly expand so that we can take advantage of that. Then there are architectural elements, right? The desire from an IT perspective is for more simplicity rather than complexity. We've seen what happens when we invest in really complex systems, right? I mean, all of us have been challenged, if you will, from the investments that we've made in the 90s and early 2000s in very complex systems, which have not necessarily always returned what we wanted, right, in terms of a return on them. So software-based environments, right, allow us to rapidly deliver and deploy services in a way that hardware-based environments have always had a challenge to do, right? That's where virtualized resources comes into play. It's where management automation, which allows somebody to spin up, if you will, a resource very rapidly, and as well as self-service, right? The expectation from users is if I'm going to develop something, if I'm an IT, if you will, consumer, I'm consuming a service, I should be able to turn up a development environment in 14 minutes and then begin the actual work without having to go through a procurement process that means 3 or 4 months. That's the expectation, right? And then finally, strategic elements. Most importantly, we're using the cloud to avoid building large investments in things that are non-core to our business, right? So third-party ownership, managed operations, let people who specialize in that and if you will, blend the cost across a large number of customers, do that for me so that I can focus, if you will, on those things which drive core business value, right? In other words, I'm going to use the cloud in order to reduce the costs on an ongoing basis for day-to-day activity so that I can take those dollars and put them into growth. So if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to use the cloud in order to solve for this good, cheap, and fast, right? What's the right model for me? What am I going to actually deploy in order to do that? Well, unfortunately, there is no one right answer to this. But I'm going to talk about a few of the options. So, number one, no cloud, right? There are applications that you have, legacy applications in place right now, services that you provide to your users whose value still outweighs the cost of migration. Some examples of this, if you have a legacy PBX platform that you bought 2 years ago and you haven't depreciated on your books, great. That's an application that's providing service to your users, right, that you may look at another time. Mainframe services. Again, most of those nowadays, I mean, that's not maybe as good of an example because most of that has evolved. But again, if you still have a legacy application that the cost outweighs, it's not time yet. Private cloud. So if you have IT services, right, that have unique security, performance, or compliancy issues, these are things that you may want to deploy on your own in your own private cloud. One of the examples I actually give of this is a common one that you all probably have, is directory services. All of you probably have some form of Active Directory or other directory service that's out there, right? That's a core performance application that you're going to want in your own private cloud. Public cloud, right? There are IT services which are key to day-to-day usage, right? But they're not core to your business. Email. It's important that everybody have email. It's important that everybody have communications and collaboration services, but it's not necessarily important for you to own those services. It's key, but it's not core to your business. And then finally, hybrid cloud. There are certain providers in the cloud that do provide applications like CRM. Salesforce is a really good example, where they have a great application, but maybe perhaps some of the data that you're actually storing in your CRM is something that you don't want up in the cloud. In that environment, the application may be cloud-based, but the database that's actually functioning for it is in your own private data center. So, if you're going to use the cloud in order to do this, and you're going to look at different models to accomplish that, well, what do you look at first? So, you do need to choose some IT services that you're going to deliver as your first targets, right? And again, when you do it, you're going to want to prioritize those services and evaluate them for their suitability for moving. And there's three things to look at: people, process, and technology, right? To start with people. Are the users of those IT services ready for a self-service utility model? If you're going to move them over and you're going to give them a portal, if you're going to give them easy access to turn things up and turn things down in a development environment, are they prepared to actually take that on, right? Does your staff have the skills to address the automation and orchestration of those services? You know, even something as simple as creating a catalog of cloud services to consume for your end users so that they can pick A, B, and C from the menu, guess what? That's a menu you have to actually manage over time. Is that something that you want to take on, or is that something that you'll want to look at from a partner? Process. Are you prepared, if you will, to incorporate new budget approaches? One of the biggest challenges that we often have on deploying cloud services to solve these types of problems is the way that originally the project was budgeted for, right? If you have a big budget for CapEx and no OpEx, right, then that doesn't really fit a utility model. On the other hand, if you have that, but your end users are actually expecting, let's say, for example, independent departments are expecting to pay you a one-time, if you will, to enable the service, then that's not a utility model, right? Those are things that you have to actually adjust for when you're looking to deploy as a service. And then have you established IT service management in your business, right? I mean, there is a cost, if you will, involved in process-wise in managing IT services like a service provider. And then finally, technology. As I mentioned before, not every IT service is a good fit for cloud technology, right? Not every one. That's changing over time, but there's some that, shouldn't be picked off right away. And then obviously, what's the cloud model that best fits that IT service that you're picking, right? We talked about that in the previous slide. So, once you've stacked them up, once you've looked at them, right? Once you've prioritized, them according to the projects that you have, what comes out as common across all of the businesses? Well, number one, business intelligence and analytics. And a good example of that, Google Analytics. If you're looking at your e-commerce engine site, you're already using a cloud service, you're outsourcing that to somebody else, right? Disaster recovery, storage, and data archival, right? There's large cost in trying to do that yourself, And yet these data centers have already built that cost structure out. So you get to balance that very evenly across a large number of people, right? And then email and collaboration. As we'll be talking about in the case study later, email, communications, collaboration, those types of services are critical for your business to function, but they're not necessarily core functions that, as an IT service provider, you want to build, develop, manage, and maintain yourself. So again, if you're looking for top hits, email, collaboration, communications, disaster recovery, storage, and business intelligence and analytics are all very hot current targets for cloud adoption. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Roger, and we're going to talk about a case study of a company that actually had some of these challenges in terms of cost, speed to market, and then obviously, user experience, right? Good, cheap, and fast, and how they overcame it by deploying cloud service technology.
My name's Roger. I've been in the IT business for longer than I would like to tell you. I've been responsible for too many phone upgrades, installations, conversions than I would care to tell you as well. But at the Star Advertiser, we had an Nortel PBX that was just flat out full. We couldn't do anything else with it. We had people in the same organizations in different suites across the hall who had different phone numbers. You had to dial the whole phone number, even though you're 50 yards away, you couldn't 4-digit dial. We also acquired the Garden Isle newspaper in Kauai. Couldn't 4-digit dial there either. And we had the Kapolei printing presses. You couldn't 4-digit dial there either. That was one of the important things for us to be able to do. And finally, our PBX started dying. The voicemail system manager died. When people left the company, we hired new ones. We couldn't change the greeting. So there's the quick part. We needed a quick fix. And of course, we didn't have anything in the capital budget to go out and spend $200,000 on another PBX. If you're in the technology world, there's one thing we hate to do is spend money on phone systems. Big money. Every 3 years, you got to upgrade it. You got a maintenance contract that's probably pretty pricey. You have at least one employee that works with the vendor that you can never find because he's working on phone issues. And other projects seem to take a back seat when there's phone problems. So one of the things I asked Hawaiian is we wanted to look at a hosted solution, get out of the PBX business altogether. We wanted it cheap, we needed it quick, and they pretty much came through. Having multiple locations was one of the things we wanted to 4-digit dial, like I said before. Once we agreed on the contract, it was a very short period of time before we installed Kapolei. There's only 52 phones down there, so that was like the test bed to make sure everything was going to work fine. We had older model Cisco switches down there, but HT dealt with that, and it was a very, very good install. Then we went to Waterfront Restaurant Row. We split it up into 3 days. A third of the phones one day, a third the next, a third the next. And we had a little bit over 300 phones at Restaurant Row. We did the training the day before or the day of. We cut over. Hawaiian Tel's team was just excellent. That check did cash okay, so it cleared yesterday. So a very excellent, knowledgeable team, especially the technicians and the trainers.
I didn't do any of the actual work, so I have to actually give credit to the people that did the work. So,
Plus, we have an excellent sales rep over there, I might add. But they were simply great. I was very impressed. We had concerns about jumping off into this hosted world. Where's my PBX? One of the difficult things in this whole process for me was to convince the accounting department and the controller and even my boss to some extent, well, how's it going to work? We aren't going to have a PBX. How's it going to work? That's very difficult to explain to them, especially when they're from old school. And once they got it through their heads that we're going to be plugging the phones into the back of the computer, then all the lights went off again. Oh, our network's going to slow down. How can you prove to me that our network's not going to slow down? And actually, Diane, our sales rep, came and met with our team, our management team, and assured them that it would not slow down. And finally, slowly but surely, the lights came on, and they finally started to understand what a hosted system was. And it wasn't just a hosted bar, They finally got it through their head, and they gave us a green light to go ahead. After we converted Waterfront in 3 days, I'm really not color coding this, but we did not have any issues. We did not have a line outside our technology office. We didn't get barraged with calls. And one of the things that really helped was HT set out the phones about 5 business days before the first cut. And they turned them up hot. So our staffers were able to make outgoing calls and get used to the equipment. And we gave them cheat sheets before the training. And their incoming calls still came in on their old set from the PBX. And a lot of the staffers did make outbound calls, and really did learn the system quite a bit before the training even happened. That was an excellent way to do that conversion. So after that was behind us, we wanted to add our Kauai newspaper, which we did 22 more phones. And now we can 4-digit dial anywhere. And some of the things were benefits besides the 4-digit dialing. It's all internet, it's all SIP trunking, it's all VoIP. Your long distance is no longer an issue or a bill. It's free. Long distance, free domestic long distance. Internationally, you get a good rate, but you still have to pay for those few calls that you might have. They have excellent rates. I can't tell you what ours is. I was sworn on that. But
all I can say is it's obviously scale makes a difference.
But we're happy. I don't think it could have went any better. The biggest conversion I had in the past was Democrat and Chronicle newspaper in Rochester, New York, is 5 stories high in a whole city block, over 1,200 phones. It took us a Saturday night and Sunday to do that. That went fairly well, but this beat that. I got a call from my boss day after the last cut, and he did checking around and asked a lot of people questions, and he gave me a call and said, good job. I haven't heard one bad thing about this whole conversion. Right now we're going to start looking at other streaming media applications like desktop sharing, web conferencing, and shared whiteboard. That's what we're going to be looking at next. I kid these guys about their report card, but I got to tell you, Hawaiian Tel hit a home run with us, and we couldn't be happier.
So again, I mean, I just wanted to, it's obviously, it's great to have a customer stand up and attest to a good job that we've done for him. But I have to actually say in reverse too, this at the time was the largest single cut that we had done. 380 something users and counting right now. So, it was great too because it really allowed us to learn a lot from what the customer wanted. And again, I mean, this is the proof of the paradigm shift that's taken place, which is, customer experience dominates, right? In a cloud environment, right, this is the type of service that is extremely customer focused. Every single person, right, uses, their communications devices in order to do business. So this is an example, though, where, there were challenges that Roger was faced with, or shall I say challenged with, from his higher-ups in terms of budget, right, in terms of functionality, in terms of growth, as well as the ability to scale up or down as he needs. And those are things that just lent themselves to the cloud. It's not that we would necessarily have, led with the cloud if the situation didn't so easily warrant it, right? So this was an opportunity for us to both, implement best practices in doing this, and it was a great experience for all of us. So, with that said, we're going to actually open it up for Q&A today. And you got thanks, Steve, I appreciate it. So are there any questions?
This is for you, Jeff. 2 questions. Who's the manufacturer of the cloud-based system that you guys use, and for the voice as well as the session border controller?
That's an interesting question. So I'll tell you, just how I was mentioning before that best practices are usually the methodology, we have partnered with best practice partners. So there's a lot of, if you will, equipment manufacturers, but for the soft switch, we use BroadSoft, right? That's the actual platform. It's got about 65% of the service provider market worldwide. And the big choice for us was the fact that there was an open API, right? So that a lot of developers actually write to that API, so that it was very extensible and could be used in a lot of different ways. I think one of the examples is if you go into the Google Play Store, you go into iTunes or something of that nature, you can actually type in BroadWorks, and up will come a whole bunch of apps pre-developed for that platform. So you don't even necessarily have to wait for, if you will, your service provider in order to start adding value to the service immediately. The second question that you asked me was about session border controller. And for the rest of you, what that is essentially that is what manages all of the active sessions that go through, including the signaling. It separates, if you will, it performs a lot of functions, but one of the main functions it also performs is to secure, if you will, all the back-end software from the actual conversations. It's kind of like a boundary layer, right? And we use Acme for that, right? Which is now owned by Oracle, right? So Oracle is the core component of that. So our architecture is a very predominant architecture in the industry. The devices that we use right now are Polycom, right? The SIP stack that they have is the most mature. And then obviously the managed LAN environment is Cisco. And the SBC at the edge is from a company called Edgewater Networks. So that kind of covers the whole base of it. But the equipment, software, and service that we've deployed is actually a best practice in the industry. It's a very common, if you will, end-to-end kind of package.
Actually, our 3-layer switches are Cisco. All the rest of our switches are HP. So HT came and got one of our switches, took it to their lab, figured it out, told us my technician, what needed to be done. He did all the programming to all the HP switches. Never had a problem. I think that's the first time you ran into HP switches.
Yeah. So he's right. When it comes to larger enterprise environment, then the LAN environment always can be variable, right? Many of our customers actually say, hey, look, we want this as a utility, so just include the switching, which we do, right? But some of them have certain environments that they want to run, they want to run their own switching environment. It really depends. Right, so in those environments, the LAN portion is probably the least worrisome, right? The LAN part, generally you have the least issues with. It's different though when you get to the WAN component, right? So, and we do a lot of unique things that we can talk about if you'd like to later on the WAN to ensure the call quality. And that was one of the things that, that Roger and Star Advertiser insisted on, was a call quality guarantee in the SLA, which we agreed to.
Any other questions?
I guess, Jeff, this is more directed towards you. If the broadband connection goes down between a facility and your hosted call solution, obviously you wouldn't be able to make external calls. Does that also mean you wouldn't be able to make internal calls as well?
No. So the way that disaster recovery works on the platform, because it's a cloud platform, right? If for any reason we lose connectivity to a site, the platform knows that because it is no longer able to connect and talk to the end device, which is registered to it, right? So at that point, any inbound call, it says, oh, call forward, not available, right? Because I cannot reach the end device. So it will automatically forward it to a number of the customer's choice, right? Now, we can redirect that to another site. We can redirect it to a mobile device, right? We can do whatever you want to do with it. I mean, and it's a unique condition. It's not like a normal call forward where you go to your phone and you hit it, right? And the call actually has to reach your phone and then forward off. It's a unique condition that says, I cannot reach the end device that is registered to this account. So therefore, where do you want me to put it, right? And that actually routing takes place in the cloud. So in many circumstances, what happens is it never ever touches the network. It goes right from our peering point, right, where it's coming in, directly to the mobile carrier or wherever else you're sending it.
But again, just the company, phone calls within your organization, obviously you couldn't dial the phone next to it.
If you've lost, shall I say, if you've lost connectivity from that to the outside world, right, then yeah, technically, but that would happen, if you will, if generally what we're discussing is something where the access circuit goes down, and a lot of the reasons for that would prevent any platform, right, from working in order to reach another site, because if the access facility goes down, generally you lose your data pipe, you lose your PRI, you lose everything, right? But there are options for that, right? There are ways of solving that by putting a legacy, if you will, service as a backup in. But that only works, right, if it's a data reason that the circuit went down. And most of the time, the data pipe is just as stable as the T1 pipe that's serving, traditional voice services. So if you're going to lose it, you're going to lose everything. And that's generally because somebody's digging around, in the parking lot and they cut facilities. So we are looking at some options for that, but every customer is unique. It can be solved. It can be solved. It's just, what's the best way to do it? Larger companies, enterprise companies, many of them at the corporate facility, they'll either have dual facilities or they'll have a backup site, right? In the event of a backup site, we just reroute. Right?
Most employees have cell phones anyways. We have a few folks already who don't have a phone on their desk. They forward their business number to their cell phone. And I think we're going to see more and more of that in the next couple of years. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the customers that we have now are inquiring about, if you will, they want the functionality, right, from the enterprise, if you will, communication service, but they want them to be able to use the device of their choice. And, we already do that with some apps for Android, for applications for iPhone, even Windows Phone, and even BlackBerry, although not many people use that anymore, but that allow you to use the account, if you will, even if you don't have an IP phone on your desk, right? So you get the full functionality without necessarily having to have a desk phone, right? And that's kind of the power of the cloud, and it's one of the reasons what customers come to us for that.
Thanks so much.